For my next Uber farming venture, I spent 380-ish divines to do 40 feared sets. That's 40 Uber Elder, 40 Chiulas. I was going to do Flawless, but then I realized buying a bunch of Flawless stones was a massive pain and super expensive, so I decided to give that a pass and just run regular 40 Uber Atziri, who I guess is still an Uber boss. I mean, her Reflect's certainly very Uber, and will insta-kill most endgame builds. That's specifically why my build has Reflect immunity. And then, of course, Uber Cortex, which is normal Cortex, but prepare for trouble and make it double. After running through all of these, I quickly and easily do the Feared. Since the Feared themselves don't have very much health, and my Penance brand of Dissipation build, well, makes them disappear, I didn't have to worry too much about my defenses, at least on that fight. Though having well-rounded defenses is very nice for the phased bosses. And so I did that. A lot of times. I'll admit around number 30-ish I was pretty tired and kind of wanted to call the strategy off, but I did end up finishing 40, and so I'm going to get into a little bit of my findings. I'm probably running close to the limit of what my sanity can take right now in terms of Uber bosses, so there's a good chance the thing I'm farming next won't have anything to do with boss fights. That said, you'll have to get subscribed and maybe leave a like while you're down there to actually see what that is. But for now, let's get into things, starting with how I ran each of the encounters. For Uber Elder, the most important thing was keeping my brands active on both the Shaper whenever he was targetable and the Elder whenever he was targetable. This insta-phased them, which greatly reduced the number of immunity phases the bosses used to finish executing their mechanics. While Shaper's bullet hell wasn't particularly threatening to me, I could only really die if I literally AFK'd in the beam for multiple seconds, it was a little bit unfortunate in regards to the fact that it took extra time. So if I kept a brand active, the boss would instantly move on to its next phase and rarely cast additional abilities. The only exception to that is on almost every single kill out of a 40, the Elder always cast one ability, either his Teleport Slam or his Channeled Tentacle Slam, which does unfortunately count as an immunity phase. So the very end was always a little bit delayed. It would go down to 1 health and then he'd insta-die as soon as the immunity ended. Next up for Chiula, I very often didn't bother to put on my Oriath's End, which made the clear slightly slower. However, I was still well ahead of the timer. If you're doing the flawless version, you very much do want the extra clear from Oriath's. The timer on that is quite tight. But as the flawless stones themselves were honestly more of a pain to buy than anything else, and I wanted to do this quickly, I decided it was much easier just to pay someone 30-40 divines and buy all of the regular stones at once, then try to live search flawless one by one over a course of several hours. Aside of that, the boss is very easy. In fact, he's not really an Uber boss, so that's to be expected. For Uber Cortex, I considered full clearing the map, and I did that on a couple of the early ones. Then I remembered that it basically drops nothing useful. Okay, technically I did get a divine drop, but let's be honest, it's not worth clearing out the entire map in hopes that you'll just get a random divine. You might as well just go clear regular tier 16 maps and boss rush if you want to do that. So I ran right to the boss, and again, it was all about setting up for the burst phases where the boss spawned. At most, they'd get off one ability, then they'd instantly die. Just be aware, since there are 2 separate bosses, you will need to cast your brands twice, so 2 correctly attached to each. I found if I was only casting 1, I would still kill them most of the time, but there was a small risk that both brands would attach to the left boss and the right boss would move away, which left it alive for way too long, and that was time inefficient. The goal is to do these as quickly as possible, which is why we're skipping the map. And a vast majority of the drops for Uber Cortex are either the Bottled Faiths and other unique items, or alternatively the 3 implicit synth items, which do only come from the boss at this point. But of course, there was Uber Atziri, which is a matter of running through the maps, waiting on all the timers for the mini-bosses, then insta-phasing Atziri, insta-phasing her clones, insta-phasing Atziri, insta-phasing her clones. I noticed that, interestingly enough, when I was insta-killing her, she didn't really have time to cast her shield minion phase. She only did it maybe twice throughout all 40 of the kills. I don't know if this is a quirk of having an absurd level of damage for the encounter, which could insta-kill her through all of her damage reductions, or if this is just something that's very intentional. Either way, it made the fight a lot faster and more efficient, so do be aggressive about placing your brands and keeping your buffs active. Or actually just about placing your brands, I don't think your buffs really mattered on this boss, her health is very low. The most important thing about the Feared isn't actually running the content, but is instead rolling the content. You want a minimum of 80% item quantity for the maximum bonuses, and the higher is better, so as many 8-mod Feareds as you can get, go for it. Then for the Feared itself, of course, I'd go in, turn on Righteous Fire, make sure Zealotry was active, walk up to where a boss was spawning, drop my brands, and start spamming Elemental Weakness, just so the curse was active as soon as the boss became active. For most of the bosses, they'll die instantaneously. Unfortunately for the Cortex boss, Venarius does a really long spawning animation, which means it's a little bit longer and your buffs can technically fall off. But as soon as the boss appears, it will also die instantly. From there, it's about collecting your loot and you're good to go. On average, it took me a couple minutes per Uber boss. Very strictly, the time it took to phase them. And since there are multiple phases, this added extra time. So I was averaging around 10 minutes for each feared set. Doing 40 of those took about 6 hours and 40 minutes. Then I took around a half hour afterwards, a little less actually, just to sort out the loot and make it all look pretty. Realistically, if you're doing this and not a content creator, it's going to be far more efficient for you to just throw a lot of the loot in a dump tab, not bother sorting it, and just let the market sort it out for itself. After all, if my highest value dump tab is 3 divines, if I know the thing is worth less than 3 divines and it's not suitable for selling in bulk, I can just throw it in without ever having to think about it. This saves a lot of time and a lot of effort and is part of making sure your sales are efficient. And so whenever you're selling a lot of loot like this, the goal is to do it as part of normal gameplay in a way that's not too disruptive. Hence, using dump tabs. But speaking of, what is some of the loot that I got and how valuable did it end up being? Let's get into that in a little more detail. This is everything that I got and collected in my dump tab, minus things that I was pretty sure weren't going to sell and so I threw out immediately. Also, minus a few things that I just tossed into my dump tabs since I knew they wouldn't be worth giving additional attention to. By far, the unidentified Watcher's Eyes and unidentified Sublime Visions were a majority of the profits. In fact, the Sublime Visions looked to be 58 divines each, which seemed a little high, so I said, you know what, I'll put it up for sale, because maybe the price is inflated and it won't sell. After putting it up for sale and rezoning, this happened just a couple seconds later. So not only did I sell all 3 Sublime Visions for 58 divines each, unidentified, but they sold almost immediately, meaning that I got 174 divines back, and it took almost no time at all. So here we have the divines from the Sublime Vision sales. Yes, it was. Also, we have a bunch of Watcher's Eyes. As you can see, some are item level 85, those dropped from the Feared, and some are 87, which dropped from Uber Elder. In total, there's 4 item level 85s worth about 17 divines, and 14 item level 87s worth around 18 divines each, or 252 divines. This is a huge portion of a profit just by itself. Another significant portion is the Blessings of Chiula, where they're about 5.5 divines each, but honestly, this kind of only broke even on the cost of the Chiula stone, so that's not that great. The 6 Bottled Faiths are around 2.3. It's 2 or 3 realistically, but I'm averaging out for rolls, so about 14. And the Gulf that I put somewhere here, I forget actually. Oh, there it is. Don't ask why it's over there. It's about 1 divine. So all in all, the big stuff's around 500 divines, which is a massive amount, but do keep in mind it cost around 384 divines for the Feared sets. More accurately, it was around 1.2 divines for the Uber at Ziri, around 4.5 for the Uber Elder, 1 divine for the Chiolas, and 3 divines for the Cortex. That's with a bit of rounding in there. I calculated out, it was 384 total for 40 of the set. Then for the Feared itself, they're like 20 each, so 40 times 20, so a couple extra divines in there, but not all that much. Then we have keys, fragments, currencies, etc. Now, these reliquary keys look to be 5 divines each, but the price was very unstable, so I'm just going to say 10 divines. It could be more, could be less. For all the fragments, they're quite expensive, as I mentioned, around 4.5 divines per set. So we're looking at about 17 divines in total for the Shaper fragments and about 9 for the Elder fragments. Then we have just a bunch of Shaper, Cirrus, Conqueror maps. Those didn't add up to very much, just a couple divines. A bulk of the profit here is the Maven's Writs, which dropped from the Feared itself, totaling around 161 divines because I got a little over 1 Maven's Writ per. Again, it's always important to roll your Feared as high as possible, get that 80% minimum quant. It's totally worth spending a couple divines extra just to have the best outcomes, or possibly even buying them if you don't want to roll them, though I didn't check the price to buy them. Rolling them's really darn cheap. In terms of uniques, surprisingly, a lot of this is vendor trash. The Cyclopean coils, the rings, all that pretty much vendor trash. Maybe you can quality it up and corrupt it and all that fun stuff. But even though I picked it up, I'm not really going to be selling it. There were 3 interesting nebuluses. They're about 1 divine each. Fun fact, the vertexes, uncorrupted in bulk, look to be about 1 divine each as well. The Call of a Void should sell for about 60 chaos each. The Vol Aspects, probably about 40 chaos each in bulk, so that's a significant amount of the profits. And so, all told, the uniques are about 50 divines and 2,000 chaos. So, almost 60 divines. Part of this is because this league, unique farming is super overinflated, and not many of these are being used. People are using the rarer variants instead. I do suspect, though, that the Garb of the Ephemeral will all sell for about a divine each, since people usually put them on animated guardians, and Rippy content plus animated guardian means you have to replace it every once in a while. Also, don't worry, we're going to do something fun with our vertexes very soon. Synthesized items. These came from Uber Cortex. There's a +1 max power charge shield, that's probably about 10 divines. A spell double damage scepter, which I estimated to be about 5, and the bow and the shield, probably about 1 each if they sell. The rest of the synthesized items went straight into my dump tabs. They'll probably sell for a couple divines, but let's just say 17 total for everything, counting only the big sales. And then last up, there were a bunch of Awakened gems. Realistically, most of these are going to go into the vendor. Awakened elemental damage of attacks is 5 divines. A couple of others are like a 50 to 100 C, maybe 80. And so that's about it. Which means, if I tally up everything here, counting the sale of the Sublimes, it's about 791 total divines. At 10 minutes a set, it's around 6.67 hours. A little time afterwards to sort the loot, let's just say 7, which means 113 divines an hour in return, or 58 divines an hour in profit, which is absolutely insane. But keep in mind, a vast majority of this is from the Watcher's Eyes and the Sublime Visions. So, if on average I'm supposed to get, let's just say 10 Watcher's Eyes instead of 14, that's almost 80 divines in total profit less. If I was only supposed to get 1 Sublime Vision, that's something like 120 divines less. Which means I can't necessarily definitively say that Uber Feared is always going to be 100 divines an hour. And prices this league are so crazy and volatile that I could see this changing tomorrow. I could see this changing to be significantly more profitable. I could also see it changing to be significantly less profitable. But the last thing to keep in mind is that the Feared itself wasn't actually contributing a majority of the profits. Because so much of it was just those Watcher's Eyes and Sublime Visions, I actually think it's more profitable to do Uber Elder right now than it is to do the Feared. But with that said, let's have a little fun. So to start with, let's look at these prismatic jewels. All right, life gain on hit with vitality, life recovery rate. I think that's a win. Cannot be blinded by precision, faster start. I think that one's vendor trash. Chance to block spell damage, vulnerability termination. Probably also vendor trash. And onslaught haste, double damage pride. I'm going to check through those quickly and see if any of them are actually valuable. All right, so after checking all these, no, they weren't valuable. This one's maybe 4 divines, this one's maybe 1 divine, and the other 2 are vendor trash. So that's how to make about 15 divines disappear in about 15 seconds. I think for now, I'll leave the rest of these unidentified as a fun surprise for later. I'll maybe even go over identifying these in a video, or maybe I'll sell them off and use them to buy more content. But there is one other thing that I'm definitely going to do. That is volleying all the vertexes, because while I could sell them in bulk, and I'm pretty sure someone would even buy them, it's going to be way more fun to vol them all and see if I hit something like +1 max power charge. So we're going to do that right now. I'm probably not going to vol a bunch of these, because realistically, I'd need to catalyze them. So I'm just going to throw them in the bargain bin dump tab, and whatever sells, sells. I may also have fun double corrupting these later. We'll see. So we're just going to go through and vol every single vertex here. This will either be minus 30 divines or plus 100. Increased effect of shock. Someone might use that, but probably not. That one just got corrupted. All right, plus 2 ore gems. Probably actually pretty valuable. This bricked gets deleted. This bricked. Oh, it has suppress on it. That's neat. Just voled. Burning damage. I don't think anyone uses burning damage with it. You never know, though. I'll put that aside to look at later. It's a lot of res. Not a good item, though. Socketed ore gems. Again, something that someone might actually use, because the +1/+2 is a pretty darn good combo. Oh, wait, that one didn't get voled. Whoops, we need our vols back. Socketed cold gems. Don't think that's going to be that. Oh, max power charge. We did it. So yeah, in general, should you gamble in Path of Exile? Does it pay off? Well, let's just price check this real quick. Yeah, I would say it very much does pay off. Price is a little bit difficult to tell for low trade volume items like this. However, I'm going to estimate that it's anywhere between 200 divines and half a mirror, which is around 450 divines. I was really kind of disappointed to see that Atziri's Acuity and Atziri's Reflection were worth so little, just because I think they're very cool items, but it does make sense as they're not used in most builds. Now for the fun part. We're just going to do a little bit more identification gambling. So let's see if we hit anything good off of these Watcher's Eyes. Keep in mind, these Watcher's Eyes, as is, are worth about 250 divines. So unless I hit something big in here, I'm straight up going to lose money. First one. Flash Charge Precision, damaging ailments faster, anger. I actually don't know if I lost money on that one. Lightning Leech, that's bad. Anger, okay, that one definitely lost money there. Attack Speed, Crit Chance, Fizz is extra. Probably pretty good. Fizz from hits taken as cold. Probably. I don't know. This is a nice defensive eye, but I feel like players generally want high damage, so they undervalue really strong defensive eyes like this, even though it is 5% evade and Fizz taken as cold while affected by Purity of Elements with Elemental Weakness immunity, which definitely helps on reducing the overcapped resistances. By the way, if you think any of these are particularly valuable as I ID them, then do be sure to let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, there's going to be an editor's note section after this where I actually go through and identify all the prices. You know, I don't know that flask charge when you deal a crit is valuable either, but it's kind of weird that it's happened twice. Oh, Hatred mod. Hatred mods are super in demand. Unfortunately, the rest is very mediocre. Oh, that's a bad eye. No one wants that, I don't think. We'll see. Maybe that ages poorly. Okay. Fizz taking his fire, ES on hit, and faster start. It's kind of cool. Attack damage, flash. What is it with the flash charge? Also precision? What the heck? That's a super good eye. That might actually pay for everything. That's awesome. Double unaffected, impale. Oof. Damage taken from mana. All right. Purity of Fire is pretty popular. Reflected, Leech, Double Wrath. Not the greatest Double Wrath. The Reflect isn't too good. Fire Pen, Dot Multi-Clarity. Dot Multi-Clarity is neat. I don't think the Fire Pen synergizes very well there, mostly because dots can't penetrate. And Fizz Conversion, immune to Ignite. Oh, that's a bad one. So yeah, some pretty good hits on the Watcher's Eyes. And that is the loot. 250-ish divines in Watcher's Eyes identified. Let's head over to Editor 10 to find out how much they're actually worth. So first up, this very nice Fizz from hits taken as cold while affected by Purity of Elements, immune to elemental weakness, and 5% chance defensive Watcher's Eye. I'd estimate it's about 30 to 40 divines, with the average being about 35. That isn't counting the elemental weakness immunity, because most builds that are going to be affording this will have it anyway. Then we have a double Wrath Precision Eye, which was a little bit hard to price check, because I'm pretty sure most of the people using it are just going to use it for the double Wrath. If I don't care about the precision at all, it looks like it's around 45 divines. So let's just call it 45. Then we have Lightning Leeched as ES plus Fire Damage Anger. Yeah, this one's kind of worthless vendor trash, unfortunately. Next, the Flask Charge on Crit, damaging ailments faster, fire damage. Again, this is kind of an awkward combo, as you don't really want all three together, and 2 out of 3 aren't necessarily in demand. Most ailment builds don't crit, and a lot of anger builds don't super care about flasks, so I'm going to say again 1 to 5 divine range, probably closer to the 1. Next up, though, here's where the combo gets good, because even just going off of 2 out of 3, where you have the attack damage and cold pen, precision hatred, without even counting the flask stuff, you're already looking at like 30 div. So this could actually be 30, could be 50, could be 250, could be a mirror. Kind of hard to tell how high the top end on this goes, since it is a 3-mod Watcher's Eye, and the exact combo is very rare. I'm just going to say, for the purposes of getting a rough answer in the video, 50 divines. I'm adding 20 div for having a good 3rd mod, since the 3rd mod isn't super in demand by a lot of builds. Then we have Discipline ES on hit, with Fizz taken as fire while affected by purity of elements. Since it is fire damage, then it's probably 30 divines, but 25 is a good minimum. Unfortunately, the leech recharge rate unaffected by poison, kind of worthless. Maybe some random person wants it for their build, but overall not very sellable. And same with this one, it's just a few mods that people don't want together. Consecrated Linger is quite easy to get from other things, and the cold damage while hatred is the least desirable hatred mod, so I'm going to say 1 to 3 divines. The same cannot be said here though. Flask charge on crit and Fizz from hits taken as fire is very, very good for a specific build, Penance Brand Pathfinder, a hit-based nebulous version. Because of that, I suspect the 45-ish divines that I got when I price checked it is in fact correct. Next up, we have this beautiful eye that is Impale Pride. You're probably not using Purity of Ice, and Haste, you're probably only using Vile Haste, so minimal uptime. Who knows though, maybe it's a nice bonus. I still wouldn't pay that much, so yeah, about 2 divines. Then we have the best Watcher's Eye out of a set. Damage leached as Vitality, plus Fizz from hits taken while affected by Purity of Fire. Even if we don't count the Mind Over Matter Clarity effect, it's around 140 to 150 divines. With the Mind Over Matter, if that's something that people actually valued, it's significantly more. But because I'm pricing these out, I want to stick to the more conservative version, and I'm just going to say 140 divines. Then we have the Leech Fizz as extra, again pretty niche. The Reflect is kind of nice, but not something that's going to really define the price. I'm estimating about 2, maybe 3 divines here. Then we have this eye, which will probably sell based on the Malevolence and minus mana cost. I'm estimating about 20 divines and not counting the Anger mod since it's incompatible with the other 2, and the other 2 together sell for more than the Anger Pen plus Clarity. Last up, and absolutely least, Fizz converted to Lightning. The rest of the mods don't really matter. Immune to Ignite is not unaffected, and unaffected by vulnerability is kind of a weird super niche thing, so basically worthless. So all told, I opened or identified about 250 divines worth of Watcher's Eyes, and a conservative estimate of how much I made back is 350 divines. Was it worth the extra time to identify and price check them? Yeah, it only took like 10-15 minutes. And who knows, a couple of the eyes have potential to sell for vastly more, potentially even including mirrors, depending on if it's the perfect Watcher's Eye for someone, as this league prices are absolutely insane. Does this mean you'll always make a profit when you open 14 Watcher's Eyes? No. Does it mean that I absolutely did here? Yep. And it brings the total well above what I talked about earlier. To go over the numbers again, my initial investment was around 380 to 385 divines. It took me around 7 hours to run everything. Initially, I got back 791 divines. Now, if we go with the most conservative estimate for a +1 power charge helmet, that rises to a whopping 1,006 divines. If we go for the most conservative estimate of identifying all the Watcher's Eyes, then it's 1,106 divines. And so I can say that I made over 100 divines an hour by running the feared and gambling on the results afterwards. That doesn't mean this is repeatable, and you should definitely take things with a grain of salt. But that is the amount of profit I made, which I think is the most profitable farming strategy I've ever done in Path of Exile. I actually can't think of anything that's even close to 100 divines an hour. This has been completely insane, but that's probably just because this league, the points don't matter, the numbers are made up, and money isn't really a thing. It kind of feels like you can do almost anything and find 100 divines lying under a rock somewhere. But at the end of the day, I didn't do this Uber Boss series because it's the most profitable or repeatable thing to do. I did it because this league provides a unique opportunity to do crazy stuff that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, and also to see absolutely insane numbers. And so if you've tried some Uber Boss farming for the first time, how did it go? And if you haven't, but you're just along for the ride, do you like the fact that I take the time to corrupt and identify items as part of a video? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. And again, big disclaimer, if you try any of these for yourself, A, if you are not within Affliction League, expect things to be very, very different, and B, know that there is a level of RNG if you're farming anything but Uber Shaper. You could in fact lose money, and the smaller your sample size, the more likely you are to lose money or gain an absolutely massive amount. And to answer the question at the start of a video, even though I did make 100 divines an hour, is it realistic? No, I don't think this is realistic. And I don't think it's going to necessarily even be sustained throughout Affliction League. It's very much cool that it happened, I'm happy that I did it, and I'm happy that I was able to share it. But I definitely wouldn't advise going into this strategy, assuming you will also make 100 divines an hour. And so with that disclaimer out of the way, I'd like to take a moment to thank my patrons and channel members for their continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this possible. You might even see your name on the screen, just like these fine folks here. If you're looking for something else to watch, then you can always head down to the description or up to the card and check out some of my Uber Boss farming videos. This one went very well, but unfortunately my Uber Maven farming didn't. So with that said, thank you for watching to the end. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again sometime soon.